Story time about how I married my father. Disclaimer, this is not my story time and trigger warning for this. My mom and dad got pregnant with me when they were only 16. They were both young and irresponsible. My mom wanted to keep me, but my dad didn't. My dad basically broke up with my mom and told her that if she wanted to have me, she would have to do it on her own. So my mom did. Luckily, my grandma helped her out a lot and she was able to stay in school. As a baby, my dad would visit me every now and then, but he wasn't really involved in my life as far as my mom says. Here's a little backstory on my dad. My dad grew up in a really strict family and he was expected to graduate and become a doctor. So that's pretty much exactly what he did. During the time that he was in college, he really didn't come see my mom or I, but of course my mom and him kept in contact. When my dad, or should I say husband, graduated from medical school, he finally got married. And of course this was hard for my mom because she thought eventually they would get back together. By the time my dad remarried, I was about 12 years old. I didn't have a relationship with him at the time and it didn't bother me. I was so busy with friends in school I never really thought about him. Not until I turned 14. This is when things started changing and I told my mom that I really wanted to talk to my dad. So he and I started talking on the phone and eventually he came to visit me. But things started changing when I turned 19. He actually ended up getting a divorce and he and I would spend more and more time together alone. Part 2 is story time about how I married my father. Disclaimer, this is not my story time and trigger warning for this. When I turned 19 is when my dad and I started spending more time together alone. Or should I say my husband? Keep in mind, I really didn't have a relationship during my teen years. We only spoke on the phone a few times and he would visit every now and then, but not a lot. When I turned 19, I was living in college and I was closer to my dad. So I decided to reach out to him and ask him if he wanted to have dinners every now and then, and he said yes. The first time we went out to dinner, we actually had a lot of fun, and it really didn't feel like I was hanging out with my dad. It was more like I was hanging out with a friend. We just didn't have that father-daughter dynamic. We would meet up almost every single weekend, and our relationship was actually very friendly. We would make each other laugh and talk about everything. And this is when we realized that we had a lot in common. Eventually, he asked me if I was dating anyone, and I told him I wasn't. When I got home, I started realizing that I wasn't thinking about my dad like a dad. I was thinking about him like a man. So the next time I saw him, I decided to tell him that. And that's when he told me that he didn't see me like a daughter either. It took a lot of courage for me to tell him this. So that's when things started to really change between us. Every time we would hang out after that, it was more like a date. We started getting to know each other and he would hold my hand every now and then. And a few weeks later, we had our first kiss. Part 3 is up! About how I married my father. Disclaimer, this is not my story time and trigger warning for this. After our first kiss, everything changed. We didn't think of each other as father-daughter. And of course, our relationship began to get more serious. And one thing we kept discussing was, should we tell our family or should we just keep it secret? So we kept it secret for almost a full year. I told my mom that I was dating someone, but I wouldn't tell her who it was. Also, a little side note, my mom and dad didn't have any contact between them at this time. My mom was actually married to someone else and they were very happy. But for me, it was getting to the point where I needed to tell somebody. Because yes, part of me felt that this was really wrong, but the other part of me felt that it was just right. I had never met anybody like him before. So I decided to tell my grandma. And she nearly had a heart attack. She called my mom right away and told her the truth. That's when my mom came over and we talked for a few hours. I explained to them everything and they still didn't agree with me. My mom called my dad and they got into an epic fight. I was totally expecting this, but it really hurt. My mom and grandma were totally against the relationship. That's when they told me that they would never speak to me again if I kept the relationship going. A few months later, we decided to get married privately. I didn't tell my mom. She actually found out through my best friend who was totally against our relationship as well. And she pretty much tells my mom everything I tell her. It's been 2 years since we got married and part of me still feels guilty and like I did something really wrong. But now it's getting even worse because I actually met someone who's my age and is not related to me. But I don't have the heart to break up with my husband/dad. I told my mom about this new guy and she really wants me to get a divorce. I feel like all along I was just looking for the love of a man because I didn't get that from my dad. Now that I'm seeing someone else, I'm realizing how wrong what I did was. But I don't want to break my dad/husband's heart. How can I fix this? What should I do? Story time about how my boyfriend shames me for having cellulite. Disclaimer, is not my story time, send me on Instagram. I'm 24 years old and my boyfriend is 21. According to him, he has never been with any girl who's had cellulite before, or even an ounce of body fat. Yes, I know what you're thinking, he's a total asshole, which in that sense, he is. But the rest of the time, he's completely fine and actually sweet. We met last year at a friend's party. At the party, I instantly fell in love with him. I thought he was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my entire life. And it was reciprocated. I saw him from across the room and he made eye contact. A few minutes later, he walked over to me and just struck up a conversation. I know that people present themselves the way they want to be seen, especially when they're trying to impress someone they're attracted to. He started telling me about how he's studying to be a doctor, how he volunteers at animal shelters, and that every single weekend he also volunteers at the soup kitchen. Everything he said was absolutely perfect. By the end of the night, he had asked me out on a date and I said yes. I did explain to him that I didn't want anything serious and he said that was totally fine. I was trying to focus on my studies, so having a boyfriend was not in my plans. But after we went on 7 dates, he asked me to be his girlfriend. He wouldn't take no for an answer. After about a month, I finally said yes. Mind you, at this point, he hadn't seen me naked, not even in a bathing suit. The very night that I said yes to being his girlfriend, he asked me to come over to his place. He made a whole gourmet dinner, even bought super expensive wine. So we ended up doing it for the first time that night. The next morning when I woke up, the first thing he said to me was, "Do you ever exercise?" I was shocked. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my boyfriend shames me for having cellulite. Disclaimers are on my story time. I sent me on Instagram. That's when he said point blank, super serious, "Do you ever exercise?" I just stared at him. I had literally just woken up in his bed after the first time we ever did it. Then I thought he must be joking. So I started to laugh a little, and then he says, "No, seriously, do you ever exercise?" I said, "Sometimes." Then he told me, "You should really try to work out at least 5 times a week." I went home and finally texted him saying that I wasn't comfortable with the way he spoke to me. That's when he said that what he said to me was completely normal, and that I shouldn't be offended. This was all in text, by the way. That's when he sends me another text message saying, "You wouldn't have as much cellulite as you do if you didn't eat so much fast food. And if you exercise 5 times a week like I told you." I didn't reply to him for the rest of the day. Later that day, he shows up to my apartment and says, "I should feel comfortable enough to tell you what I think about you." He somehow ended up making me feel bad, and I ended up apologizing. Obviously, after that, I became really self-conscious about my cellulite and my entire body. So anytime we were together, I would always stay under the covers. By the way, my boyfriend doesn't have a great body. He's super soft and pudgy. Last week, he told me that he had abs though. Part 3 is story time about how my boyfriend shames me for having cellulite. Disclaimer, it's not my story time. Instead, I'm on Instagram. One day, he pulls up his shirt and says, "Look, I have abs." Which, no, he doesn't. He's super soft and has a thick layer of fat on it. I smirked and he said, "What?" And I said, "You don't have abs." Then he says, "Yes, I do. I'm in better shape than you." By the way, he said this in front of his friends, so I was super embarrassed and stayed quiet the entire day. He finally went to drop me off and I was so happy to be home. But he decided to come upstairs with me. Got straight into my PJs. And when I came out of my bedroom, he says, "Wow, your cellulite's getting worse by the day." That's when I finally broke. I turned around and started yelling at him. I told him he had no right to talk about my body the way that he did, and that all he does is objectify me. He started laughing and said, "Wow, those are big words." And that when we met, he thought that I was in better shape. But my clothes obviously tricked him. I'm 5'4" and I weigh 130 pounds. I am by no means fat, but the way that he was bullying me was making me think that I was. That's when I told him that he was the fat one, and that he had a big, huge beer belly. I also told him that his face was super round, but that didn't bother me. Oh yeah, and that his hairy back was gross. Then he said, "Wow, I can't believe you're attacking my physical appearance." Then he stormed out of my apartment, and as soon as he left, I felt happy. We haven't spoken in 4 days. I'm afraid that if he asks me to get back with him, I will. But I should just break up with him, right? What should I do? Am I the asshole for using my boyfriend's toothbrush to clean the toilet whenever I get mad at him? Anytime I get mad at him, I just find little ways to sabotage him. Disclaimer, is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been together for 2 years. From the beginning of the relationship, I had to chase him. He was dating a few girls when I first met him, but I managed to bag him. The problem is that he knows that I was the one that was chasing him. He never had to court me or anything, so he knows he can get away with a lot. For example, we live together and he never cleans the apartment. He automatically assumes that I will do his laundry, his cooking, and cleaning. I have to make the bed every single morning when we both get up. I have to make him his breakfast and literally be his mother the entire day. Worst of all, we've both been working from home because of COVID. So this means I have to cater to him all day long, even when I'm in my meetings. And because I don't want to cause any fights or confront him about it, I started to retaliate in my own way. Number 1, I started cleaning the toilet with his toothbrush. Sounds terrible, I know. I need some way to release this anger though. It gets worse. Part 2 is up. Am I the asshole for using my boyfriend's toothbrush to clean the toilet? Because he uses me as his personal maid, I had to find a way to retaliate. Using his toothbrush on the toilet was the clear answer, but it didn't stop there. Anytime he would leave his dishes unclean or ask me to do his laundry, I started to do other things. Recently, I've been putting dairy in his food, which I know he can't have because it gives him the runs. I switched out his special shampoo for regular old Dollar Tree shampoo. Anytime his packages would arrive, I would just hide them somewhere in the apartment, and whenever he would go crazy waiting for it, I would finally say, "Oh, this package? Oh, that's been here for like 4 days already." The look on his face was so worth it. A few nights ago, after I worked all day and cleaned and made him his food, he asked me for a massage. By the way, it was 7 p.m. and I was finally ready to relax myself. So I told him that I didn't feel like it because I was tired. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat down on the couch, and started watching a movie. He decided to throw a tantrum. He stood in front of the TV and asked me for a massage again. I mean, he's a grown man. Part 3 is up. Am I the asshole for using my boyfriend's toothbrush to clean the toilet? After he stood in front of the TV blocking my view, he asked me for a massage a second time. And once again, I said, "No, I'm tired." Then he starts complaining about the lunch I made him. He said the pasta was overcooked and the sauce tasted weird, which it probably did because I did put dairy in it. Instead of holding my ground, I told him fine. And I proceeded to give him a 30-minute massage when I was so tired myself. I'm sure you're wondering if I love him. The answer is yes. I love him very much, which is why I don't want to break up with him, but I'm really close to having had enough. He never offers to help me. He never offers me a massage. He expects me to clean and do everything for him. When I've asked him for help, he doesn't really want to. So I don't think he's gonna change that part of himself. But I do have fun with him and he's an amazing guy. I don't know what to do. Should I leave him? Should I stay? Or do you guys have any ideas on what sabotages I could do next? Help a girl out. Bye. Story time about how my husband left me for my twin brother. I, female, 25, have been married to my husband for 6 months. When we started dating, it was just casual. I never thought I would marry this man, but it happened. We had a pregnancy scare, and that's when he told me that if I was pregnant, that he would marry me. We took a few pregnancy tests, and most of them came out positive. So we were convinced we were having a kid together. Of course, he asked me to marry him, and not until 3 months later did we decide to go to the doctor. And as soon as we got to the doctor, they said, "You're not pregnant." We couldn't believe it, but nonetheless, we were still married. He and I weren't exactly soulmates. When we started dating, we had a lot of fun together, but my friends would always make comments about him possibly being gay. I never took him seriously because he was interested in me, a woman. Sometimes my male friends would say, "Oh, he stares at me a lot," or that he would ask them to go out for drinks by themselves. I thought he was just trying to be nice and getting to know my friends. Obviously, I was wrong. My twin brother and I don't have a really close relationship. We had a falling out when he found out that I was pregnant. He thought I was ruining my life by having a kid, but it turns out I wasn't pregnant. So we started getting close again. He would come over to our house and spend a lot of time with my husband and I. But then I realized that they were doing naughty things together. Follow for part 2. Story time about how my husband left me for my twin brother. I would come home and find my twin brother on the couch with my husband. Of course, I just thought they were trying to get to know each other. I mean, we just got married and all. Got to the point where my brother was coming over to my place every single day. And my husband and him would hang out all day together. My husband works from home, so he's always there. Own my own business, so I'm usually not home before 3 p.m. Every time I would come home, my twin brother was already there. Actually, I told my twin brother he needed to give me and my new husband our privacy. That's when he said that I was overreacting and that he was just trying to get to know him. Then he said, "Are you jealous?" I looked him straight in the face and I said, "Why should I be jealous? You're my twin brother." Then he laughed, got up, and left my house. And just like that, I knew something was going on. In part 1, I told you guys about those friends that warned me about my husband being gay. I decided to call on my friends and ask them to tell me why they thought my husband might be gay. They gave me lists. And I started writing everything down. And everything started connecting. I'd come to the realization that I married a gay man and that he was possibly having an affair with my twin brother. I mean, could things get worse? I decided to confront my husband. What he told me literally shocked me. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my husband left me for my twin brother. I confronted my husband. He told me that my brother essentially had been following him around and wouldn't leave him alone. In other words, he was putting all the blame on my brother. But instead of believing him right away, I grilled him. Started asking him questions about his past, like why he had never had a relationship before me with another woman, why all of my friends, literally all of them, thought he was gay. Of course, he denied everything, so I got on the phone and called my brother. I asked him to come over really quick, and he did. And of course, I started interrogating him too. That's when I told my husband to repeat what he had told me. But he couldn't. He looked at my brother and said, "Sorry, I told her the truth." My brother said, "Which is?" And my husband says, "You won't leave me alone and that you've been harassing me." That's when my brother tried to swing at him. Then my brother spilled all the beans. He said that on my wedding night, my husband and him made out. And that after that, my brother would come to our house after I left every single morning to be with my husband and to do all the nasty things they wanted to do to each other. My brother told me that the one who started it was my husband. I looked at my husband and he couldn't deny anything. I divorced him the next day. My now ex is trying to convince my brother to be in a relationship with him, but he doesn't want to. And my dad is hunting my ex down. Bye.